I'm Jeff Durst. By title, I guess I'm president of Hull Forest Products. I spend most of my time on our sales efforts, lumber sales domestically and for the export markets. We're in Pomfret Center, Connecticut, home of Hull Forest Products, where we've been since 1971.
How would you say that your industry, your work,
Yeah.
is impacted by the weather, kind of weather changes, things like that?
Usually we think a couple times a year we're going to get bogged down because it's going to get too wet on the woodlots. Kind of a mud season that we call it. The last couple of years, the weather being as it has been, there really hasn't been any freeze, and mud season kind of has been a long, drawn-out affair where you stop, start, stop, start. Usually we'd be thinking, November is going to be a tricky month. You get partway through December, then it's going to firm up, and you're going to be pretty good until middle of February, something like that. But the last few years, that hasn't been the case at all. I mean, we've gotten into February and we're like, okay, are we ever going to get a real freeze? And at that point, it's meaningless if you do, because you get it for a week or a week and a half, and then it's gone. It's working its way out. So, yeah, we've kind of seen those abnormal patterns, kind of like, because we're doing the same thing. We're like, okay, let's build up the inventory, because typically what happens is this. And it hasn't been that way. And another thing that comes into play is you may buy a woodlot that you can operate if you get a good freeze. So I buy it today thinking I'm going to operate it in January or February, and you never get a good enough freeze. Well, now you're hanging on to the lot for a year before you get another crack to go back at it. Those are tough situations.
Do people in your industry talk about climate change at all, or global warming and how to plan for it?
It does. I mean, if we go to a Society of American Foresters seminars and those kinds of things, it will come up. Obviously there's a couple schools of thoughts there. Does it come up concretely that it is or isn't happening? I don't really hear it of that way. There's this evidence and there's that evidence. I don't think as an industry we're sitting on our heels going, oh my God. Maybe it's a little bit of a factor in some of these winters. I mean, I don't know. But I don't think anybody's like, oh my God, what's coming down the pike? And is it real or not real? I guess we would look at it and say, what would we change if it were real? I don't know, there's a lot we could change.
If climate change is happening, whatever the cause may be, are there ways that you think that it might impact the community?
I don't know. The obvious thing I guess you think about is everybody's energy costs, right? And I think in the narrow sense, people here, I mean, is that a loser for them? I don't think so. If they spend less on their heating bill, I'm thinking, in the bigger picture, in a house, on the big picture, yeah, people might be concerned about, what it's doing to habitat and wildlife populations and all those kinds of things. So there's certainly some bigger issues, but the guy in the local community and where it impacts him, what he sees every day, potentially he may see as a plus. But he'd say, you know what, yeah, if this is happening, it sure has been good on my heating bill. Not that it's a good thing.
Are you personally concerned at all?
No, I mean, I don't feel like I got into it deep enough. You see documentaries about this and that, and it's really amazing, I think, to see how one thing impacts another. I guess where I'm a little bit is this not what's supposed to happen anyway to some degree? What is the whole evolution of the universe, of the earth, and I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that we do that we perceive that we're having this change, and I guess I'm not of the viewpoint that is change always bad.
Let's say that we drew the link that human emissions from burning fossil fuels was contributing to some kind of climatic change. How do you think that we should progress in, regulating them on a global level, if at all?
I guess I would look at it and say, what's the difference between emissions here and emissions there? They're emissions, and if we make that connection that it's bad for the environment, then what else do we need to know? You're emitting and I'm emitting. I have a social responsibility to address it. You have a social responsibility to address it. Let's address it. If the rest of the globe is saying, okay, U.S., step up, and look, you've gotten us to this point, so it's your fault. I get that a little bit, but I also say, okay, India, China, whoever we're talking, are you willing to put the brakes on where your society is because of this issue?
Right.
No. You're going to escalate it the best you can. All right, we all see this need. Here's what the U.S. has done. We need to continue to work going forward, sure, but because you're lagging, you should work on catching up because the technology is here for you to use. When I hear that there's plants in, I don't think it's in Shanghai, but close to Shanghai, that's producing all the iPads and everything else, all the Apple products, that has, what did I hear, 50,000 workers at one plant. I'm going, there's emissions there.
Right.
What are they doing about it?
We talked with Jeff for a while about whether there's a relationship between changing climate patterns and fossil fuel emissions. And one of the ideas we discussed was if there's any downside to improving energy efficiency and using better pollution control technologies.
From the business standpoint, the cost to me to apply that stuff, while the goal is certainly worthy, it means I am less and less able to compete in the global marketplace, which essentially means slowly I'm driving myself out of business because I won't be able to compete. And the guy that doesn't either voluntarily or isn't regulated to do this stuff now all of a sudden is at the top of the food chain in terms of the market. The globe looks as the U.S. to take the lead, and a lot of times taking the lead means put the money up front to make it happen. And I personally think there's more to leading than that. Yeah, that's a component of it, but that's not the cure-all. And I think as a result, what we do in taking the lead essentially is reduce our competitiveness in the global market. And whether you're a free trade guy or not, I don't think that's doing anything to globally move things ahead, however we perceive that. So I just think it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
It always seems to be when there's an issue, for me a lot of times it boils down to, okay, US, you take the lead, which means you pony up before anybody else does.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's the way to go.